I'll have to read his own from the book because it doesn't seem to. Please, can you remove Romeo Oriogun, please? It's the wrong one you are showing. Joe Oshi, a 2017, you find him on page 13, a 2017 finalist of the Brunel International African Poetry Prize. He is the author of Inside the Flower Room, selected by Kwame Doss and Chris Abari for the new generation of African poets. No, you can come here. Here. I'm sorry because we couldn't find this first, and I have it on my phone, so it's here now. Professor of English and current Vice Dean, Postgraduate School, University of Uyo. His poetry has been widely studied and read to audiences both in the country and around the world. He is 2000 distinguished Satellite Award of Department of English and Literary Study, University of Calabar, and a 2010/2011 honoree of the Academia Awards Education Ambassador of Akwa Ibom State. He is co-editor of 2009 Anna publication, Themes Fall Apart, but the Center Holds, and of Arrows of God, critical essays on the leadership question in Achebe's Arrow of God. Thank you very much, Professor Joe Oshi. We couldn't find these on time. That's why I didn't know that you were even there. Thank you very much. No, the full one is in the brochure. This is, as we have said, we want everybody to have just 80 words on what we're showing, so that it doesn't look like somebody has been privileged or so. That's why this is, I insisted on reading this and not the one. So people are going home with what we have in the brochure. So to moderate is Mr. Kola Tuboso. Kola Tuboso, please. A while ago, I was comparing notes with Kola Tuboso, and for the first time in my long years, I discovered I'm a short man. I was looking at the guy, I said, please, can you just bend down a bit? So let's sit down there. Kola Tuboso, thank you very much. Writer, teacher, and linguist, and publisher of Olongo Africa. Kola is the author of 2 collections of poetry, Edwardsville by Heart, 2018, and Igbaewe, 2021, a Yoruba dictionary of names at yorubaname.com, and several works in translation between English and Yoruba. He's a Fulbright Scholar 2009, and until recently, a Chevening Research Fellow at the British Library in London, 2019/2020. His work in language advocacy earned him the Premio Ostana Special Prize in Italy in 2016. He's currently the African co-editor of the Best Translations Anthology, and you can reach him at kolatuboson.com. Thank you very much. The panel is composed, but I would like to appeal that I should do Adekoya again because we didn't have that. Can I have Adekoya on screen? Can I have Adekoya on screen?
He's there now.
Okay. I wish I had eyes at the back. Segun Adekoya teaches oral and written literature at the Department of English, Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife. The first chairman of the Osun State chapter of the Association of Nigerian Authors, and the author of the widely acclaimed book, The Inner Eye, an oral on Wole Soyinka poetry. If a Testament is his 5th collection of poems. So, please, a big round of applause for the... Oh, you have your mic. Okay. So the others will be joining us online. That is Romeo Oriogun. I think he's the one in Nebraska. I think he's there already. And Sadiq Zukogi, they'll be joining us. I'm not sure Adekoya can join us there. So if you are just joining us, we welcome you to this afternoon. It's an afternoon, it's a feast of poetry, actually. That's what we want to do. We want to enjoy the written word in the context of entertainment, music, dance, and all of that. But then this is the engagement with the writer. So Kola will be leading us into what we have to do. Our guests who are online, we thank you very much for spending this afternoon with us. And we hope that you find this afternoon very interesting, even though you are behind the screen. Thank you very much, Kola. The floor is now yours.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And you're all welcome here to this wonderful book party, we call it, which is going to be a conversation with these distinguished long-listed writers, many of whom are my friends, colleagues, professor in case of Raji, and friends. So for the next 2 hours, we're going to have a conversation about their work. They're going to read from their poems, from their books, and you're going to have a chance to ask questions yourself. So if you have any questions, please note them down, and you'll have a chance towards the end to ask them questions. You're all welcome. And first of all, congratulations for being on the long list of the... Please, you can give them a round of applause. You'll read, and then I'll ask a few questions, and then you read again. So let's start with the reading instead of putting myself in the story. So if you have, I don't know who wants to go first. Should we go this way? Yes, let's go from farthest from me. I would like you to read whatever poem you can. Each person has 3 minutes to read from their book. And, or should we start with people online? I think we should start with people online because we haven't heard from them since. Romeo, if you're there, I would like you to read any poem you can within 3 minutes from your book, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, good morning. It's I think 9 a.m. here. So first of all, I'm just very honored to be on the list and to be among people who I've looked up to and who have read their poems. So I'll be reading Cotonou, which is, I think, the third or fourth poem in the book Nomad. Cotonou, 1, the meeting place. In some folklore, birds would always meet at the edge of a town. It was how they knew they were on a journey to save themselves from the loss of a season. At the intersection of 3 busy roads, 2 buses broke down and spilled us out, humans tired of journeys. Across the road, we watched the beauty of a palace. I smoked and wondered how many days of sweat went into the earth to produce such beauty. While smoking, I met a man called Trolley, named for his expertise in flinging humans across borders. His work of terror suffers in the coldness of brutals across Bamako, across Tripoli, across Mauritania, and across the red sands of Cadiz. He watched his girls drink gin on the sidewalk. I asked him, "Do you feel shame?" He answered, "I desire beauty. In its pursuit, there is no end, only ruthlessness." The road sang a dirge. The girls danced their sadness. There on the road that is not home, I looked into his eyes and saw the terror of exploitation. A leaf fell from a tree nearby, and I was reminded of the endless movement of the world, of the girls dancing, of the sadness of my fingers obeying the call of my body's addiction to nicotine. As a bird sang of leaving the world as it is, a terror, a war we're still living in. 2 advertisements. A sign on the road read, "Buy handmade drums and beat the wildness of your soul." What is the sound of all our sorrow? Years after a war, a veteran went crazy from hearing in his head the wailing of 1,000 women who gave up peace to sing their dead songs to the afterlife. Is this not a kind of wildness? Music breeds its own fear, a sound that leads to our loneliness, like how the spools of a cassette turning renders me into an animal dying in an empty lair. What is the night's ache? What is the emptiness of a city full of voices? Exile is the dying voice of a wounded angel. I beat the drum of my life, and the angel and I dance to the wild sadness of life. Even God ran away from this rhythm. Look around you. We are left alone with the mud of creation, and maybe all there is the creation of a new way of life. But God, where do we hide the violence? 3. Voices. The driver says in the dark of the night, when every passenger is asleep, he hears the true language of the road. He says he hears the voices of cities thousands of miles away. The voice of exile is a murmur crossing rivers and sea, crossing empty roads until it washes over a man, a baptism of loss. If the road and the driver could speak to each other, what would this language born out of friction be? The driver's eyes are full of dreams, full of excitement of new cities. He could be the poorer incarnate of Mansa Musa, who, instead of pouring gold dust into air, pours stories to compete with sand, stories of nomad, people running in and out of cities. Perfect gold is human scroll of chronicles. Even Bessie-haired giant of letters who battled sand for stories would be proud of this precision of narrative, this perfect bridge of the imagined and the songs of mothers rocking babies as countries cut through their body. Hotel de Chiduru, or it's a sequence plan, I guess. A bus parked beside a water fountain. A cherub spilled water from hotted lips. Across the hotel park, there were oysters heaped on enamel trays. Fried behind walls were offered to us as secret of the sea. Behind this market of oysters, there was once a market for flesh in Oida, and rooms filled with black flesh in chains, branded like cattle, headed into pens by older black men paid in clear bottles of gin. The sea crashed on naked stones as we ran into the hotel bar. Perched on a three-legged stool, an old black woman sang the fable of siblings lost at sea. She was a lamp attracting us at moths. There were open windows, sunflowers in broken pots, curtains made out of beads sang in the wind, birds flew in and out. Smoking a carefully rolled blunt, I listened to this place. A silent television played a Nollywood movie. We were trapped in time, in the commodification of flesh, sent without the gift of ablution. In some other world, I am guilty of silence, just as I am in this one. Do not forgive me. It was dawn, and I walked towards the bar as the sea received into its bosom the memory of a ship traveling to the new world. 5 soda a day. While drinking coffee on the Trans-West African Highway, I was seized by a sadness. I thought of road as memories, as dawns rising out of exile. Collecting dust as I walked that morning, I might be inheriting the past. Shame of knowing after decades rainfall wasn't enough to wash away the guilt of my ancestors. There are moments such as this, when ancestral mark weep, when rain bear witness to bodies thrown overboard slave ship. Even in tears of origin, there is no atonement enough to restore a people lost to a ship's belly. No forgiveness. There is only the sting of cold air, the open Atlantic, elegy, only that. Thank you.
Thank you, Romeo. A round of applause for him, please. It's a shame we couldn't see him while he was reading. Technical issues. I hope the next person, Sadiq Zukogi, has a video on. We'll also insist that make sure you stick within the 3 minutes space so that we can get through everyone on time. Is Sadiq there? If he is, please proceed to read from your book, Your Crib, My Qibla.
Thank you, everyone. It's early morning here, but I have been feeling the excitement, and I have friends, fathers, both on the short list and in the audience. I'm going to read the last 2 poems from the book, Your Crib by Qibla. Waterlog. When mother whispered, "What doesn't kill you?" I replied, "Turns me into a living corpse. I am the spitting image of my shadow, a face absorbed into a night aching from what has been ripped off. I am fluent in my silence. What transpires after stars collapse? What happens if the dead turns into trees crawled into the passage of time, blabbering about its inadequacy to erase existence? The agony is a silent war in my body. Each time I open my mouth to speak, inhaling more pains that jam-packs my lungs like a riot ground. Come into my foxholes with eyes that see what others can't. Let's shadow each other. I would collect the light that leaked into the parching river. My eyes are a window waterlogged with tears. I cannot see anything other than what frightens me. I am leaving off my fear. How do I consent to joy? If it's a currency, what can it buy? All I want is to crawl away from a house built in perpetuity for grief, with corners spidered with longing, pain, and tears. My tongue inside a keyhole cannot unlock the door. The last poem I'll read is titled 1 Year After. It's written to commemorate the passing of my daughter. Today is a year since the earth opened its mouth to the size of your body and swallowed. Like a ghost, I am learning to walk the earth without my body. Regret, a rosary wrapped around my wrist, leads me away from the universe's favor. If death is truly everywhere on earth, where could I have hidden you from its grasp? Perhaps behind a star that shines every 500 years, the shaft of sorrow, like sunlight, striking the ground where I stand. God knows that I am not perfect, but I found the pearl in loving you. Each time in the swelling vapor of love, I hold you, blended into the rainbow, marking its body across the skyline. The world stops spinning. Instead, a bubble grows over it, and time cannot exert itself on us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for sticking to the time. We're going to start the reading from the long end of the line, please. Yes, Professor, see, this is my problem. Professor Oshi, Joseph Oshi, please read from your work. You have 3 minutes. I think the mic works.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me confess that I'm usually the poorest reader of my poems, but I'll try. The first poem is a very short one. At page 25, for those of you who have copies of the book, the title is Africa Today. She is the blind, bowl-bearing beggar, sitting on a roadside mound of gold, yawning all day, yawning all night. America arrives, leaves a chunk of the gold, drops a coin and some affronts, and passes. Asia arrives, leaves a chunk of the gold, drops a coin and some contempt, and passes. Australia arrives, leaves a chunk of the gold, drops a coin and some chuckle, and passes. Europe passes, leaves a chunk of the gold, drops a coin and some insult, and retires. They inhale her own one-eyed leader, clears the bowl of the dropped coins, blames her plight on her slothfulness, and passes, belching all the way as his beggar land yawns.
Thank you.
The next poem is, next poem is Weird Harvest. These sweet-tongued augurs plant and water here a wide species of weird crops. Blindness of the majority, hunger for the honest, idleness of seed-bearing youth, and fratricidal feuds among the tethered. As weapons for harvest of throne in that brisk ballot season, when the belching hills and yawning valleys commune, when the Iroko and grass commune on this soil in the lethal grip of greed, and thirst. As our dawn marches in, I will ask someday before I move, where is the son of the president and of the senator? Where is the son of the governor and of the minister? Where is the son of the party chair and of the contractor in this frenzied march towards his opponent's house, axe armed? I will ask someday before I storm out, as spokesperson for the yawning, where is the spouse, the cousin, the niece, or the nephew of the belching, for whose stool I'm dying to secure, whose death I am trying to die? I will ask someday, on behalf of my fellow yawning, I will ask, I will ask, I will ask.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Next is Professor Raji.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for bringing us here. I have two poems. One is short, the other one is long.
3 minutes, sir.
Yes, I will. Page 24 of my collection. There's a new train coursing through our lands. I have been to the valleys and the hills of these lands. I have followed the trail of great rivers. I have supped with kings and commoners. I have seen the entrails of complicit men and women who till their banks, zip their lips, and kill their conscience. I have also climbed mountains with men who have the energy but have no voice. I don't know why we do not debate the delicate climate and our cunning ways. I don't know why we cannot argue about the revolution of the new slavery around us. I don't know why I'm asking you if you know. There's a new train coursing through our lands. Faka fiki, foko faka fo. Foko faka, faka fiki fo. Fokak. Fokak is the choo-choo train, their silent electric train, the new Amistad, hoisting the Mayflower flag from Cairo to Cape Town, from Kigali to Kampala, from Bujumbura to Banjul, from Lagos to Luanda to Lilongwe, from Harare to Conakry to Nairobi, from Abuja to Accra to Addis, from Dakar to Dar es Salaam, from Maputo to Marrakesh. The captains are ready. The drivers, legion. I don't know why the new scramble is that fierce, yet unseen. I don't know why the passengers are silent and dying in these coaches of death. I don't know why the court of poets is not alive. And I don't know why the conclave of thinkers is in trance, dead to the common fear around us. I don't know who to believe between the political economists and the economic politicians. They who bring the rotten meat to the square and feed their children with maggots. I don't know why. I don't know why we are not serving odd questions to these cold-hearted dealers. I don't know why we must beg a battered woman to marry it. I don't know why we worship the sun still while others gather the rays to steal. I don't know why we watch foreign marches, why we don't ignite marches on blighted streets. I don't know why we have been too silent, complicit, silent for too long. There's a new train coursing through our lands. Faka fiki, foko faka fo. Foko Faka, Faka Fiki, Fo. The new train of the new slavery is up. The new train of the new slavery is coming.
Thank you. Thank you. He has given me the permission to move on, having exhausted the 3 minutes. Lovely poem. Next would be Abari Goomba.
Yeah, thank you. I have 3 minutes. I'll try to read 2 short poems under 3 minutes. The first one is Dying Alone. Somewhere out there, a child is dying. You tell me it makes no difference to die in the company of others, to share a community of death rattles that rise and cease at once. Somewhere out there, a child is dying alone. You tell me it makes no difference to be amongst many in the eye of a massacre. Somewhere out there, a child is dying alone. I have known the land of many screams, of bloody knives and swans. Somewhere out there, a child is dying alone. I have seen the glee of killers who wipe their hands with my country's flag after they have slaughtered a village after village. Somewhere out there, a child is dying alone. Another village this hour, another slaughter. A wounded child has crawled alone into a nearby bush. Somewhere out there, a child is dying alone. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next one is called A Country Defined. The Republic is a graveyard. There are beautiful headstones, there are ugly ones too. There are unmarked graves everywhere hiding the bones of legions and legions whose names are lost in a wild wind. There are broken graves, they give their stench to the air. There are bouquets of flowers littered by some who care. There are flowers planted by the bereaved to give beauty to the resting places of their dead. There are wildflowers growing from pollens careered by birds and beasts. There are wreaths, there are rites. There are grave diggers working each day towards their own last breath. There are those who profit from the enterprise of death. There are mourners broken by grief. There are mourners who sing of celestial afterlife because they are moved to invest their hopes in the unknown. There are those who deny the mountain facts of loss. There are optimists who know that tragedies are too many and too often, but they still dare to be upbeat at sunrise. There are those who know that every sunrise calls us to rise, and every nightfall calls us to stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Swedi, you're next. This book is titled The Memory and the Call of Waters.
So I'll be taking 2 short poems. The first one is Balom, Benue, and the Lambs. It's dedicated to Father Felix Tiolaha and some other priests who were killed.
What page is
Benue. On a quiet dawn in Balom, 2 priests and a congregation became lambs slain on St. Ignatius' altar as camouflaged headers marched through town. Elsewhere, memory raises the pain of the transgressions of suspicious headers, turning River Benue's waters to rich crimson. Smokes accompany whales as pictures showed many ends. Old souls sprawled in double pools of red and brown, shit, excrement, dancing for attention with bullet-designed bodies. Roasted meat fills the air, a cannibal delight as charred flesh litter the town. And somewhere, a suckling baby begins to lick the blood that slowly drips from her mother's head. Elsewhere, a child crawls from a bunker that is his father's bulleted body, and eventually becomes a million pieces, scattered, shattered by a bomb.
Thank you.
So the second poem is Stars Out.
What page is on?
Page 26, sorry. The stars put out their light, leaving the gray sky. The moon, compensating, smiled meekly, a clear ball different from yesterday's banana. We stayed an eternity with you, but just as our hearts counted a second, the night rolled away its mat, bringing in the harsh reality of day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know about you all, but I've been waiting to hear the voice of a woman. And here we go. Equal.
I'll also be reading two poems. First is Crumbs from page 40. Rush at the crumbs as masters wipe them off table's edge, unashamed, beg for more. Promise allegiance and dedication, anything to secure continued droppings from the barrels of black crude beneath your father's farm. Woo them saying, Boss, have fun, nah? You know your boy is loyal. Chairman, may they leave something for your boys now. Remain a faithful boy, while contaminated air and polluted rivers number your days. Ever loyal, do his messy cleanups, erase unwanted elements for the master. Do anything, but don't engage the boss in serious conversation about community entitlements, oil spills, education, jobs for youth. How long before you tire of man-made crutches while your limbs remain dormant? When will you awaken and ask whence these handouts came, or query the original mission of those millions before they turned crumbs for boys? How long before you stand, demand a say in the sharing of this communal meal, a meal for which your land's depths were plumbed while you continue to live in penury and filth? When will you see that answers only push crumbs your way? When will you see that masters only push crumbs your way to keep boys on a perpetual leash? Thank you.
Thank you.
The second piece is titled, When No Drums Can Be Heard. When no drums can be heard, but the master, I'll take that again. When no drums can be heard, but the dancer exhibits her finest moves in the village square, who will urge her to stop? When dogs howl and bark, though neither children nor harm are found on the street, who will throw stones to caution the whelping animals? This game is larger than the Iroquois trunk. Let us gather as one to dissect it from all angles. Jetties nor guns will suffice for this. Herders have wreaked enough havoc with those tools. We need no bombs to amplify our cries, no more trucks laden with innocent pupils. Dapchi, Chibok, Buniyadi, Baga, mourn still, for the dozens of children we forgot to name still. If we have won the war, why then do our tears persist? Why then no technicality in the fearful palpitations of our hearts? What do we do with youth whose only currency is eagerness and their likely recompense, hunger? A hunger that bites not according to mother tongue, tribal marks, or religion. Will we cling to broken promises, ride on the memory of forsaken dreams, oiled by years of accepting pittance, though we are surrounded by plenty? The emperor's new clothes glitter like diamonds, but only to his eyes. Who will risk life and speak this abominable truth? Adam fit into Eden in his birthday suit, but the year was not 2023. The greedy return with tales of their foes' plots, but behind, friend and foe blend as one. Greed, their unified language. Ethnic division, their strongest arsenal. Another 4 years. The beats may vary, the dancers unchanged, clothed in new attire, but we are not fooled. This resistance is not unpatriotic. It is our hearts refusing to bleed. This resistance is our lips refusing to sing while they dance on our tombs and sip champagne from the skulls of our disenchanted youth. When no drums can be heard, but the dancer exhibits her finest moves in the village square, who will diagnose this condition? Will you also dance? Will you? Will you also dance, though no music assails your eardrums? Or will you take a stand, armed with your voices and PVCs, demanding better service, so tomorrow we can claim our country lives? Thank you.
Thank you. You stole part of my time, but thank you. Next is Amun Nadi. 3 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Permit me to read 2 poems.
Short ones.
Each of them dedicated to every one of us who's passing through difficult times at this moment in this beautiful country of ours. If you have this book, go to page 141, to portals. I stand as a lintel, awaiting your arrival. Woman with eyes of an endless memoir, in whose hands road becomes libations. To pass through my portals and possess this heart I set as a throne in love of you. Tall and wooden, I too am set, carved by time's carpenter's chisels. This I confess. On my planed frame, the door to dreams stands fastened, awaiting your son's key which unlocks the dingy notions of man. For the house stands whose foundations are set upon dog earth of a bruised day. In me, rooms exist which wait to receive your incoming, so you may turn light on that slumbered through the dark nights. Corners tarry, unheeded as desolate kids, holding cobwebs as threads spun to tell dark lodgings of this concrete aloneness. How painted appear the walls of sadness, how whitewashed heart of the sawman. So pray come. This cold linted urges you. Warmth of embrace, fresh dazzle of love. Your breath has moved the musty blinds. I stare as though I dance to a deity's chant. Even this floor lies prone your homage. Make me the palace in which love reigns, priestess of earth's awakening. The night has lingered too long. Sad crickets mock fiercely the fireflies, and my door stands open to receive again the incoming day.
Thank you.
And then you may go to the very first poem in this book, My Earth. My love, my earth. Love you is to live. To live is to love you. To leave you is to wither and slowly, slowly die. My earth, my love.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, please. James Eze. It should be on. If it doesn't work out,
all right.
mind. Okay. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. The first poem I'm going to read this evening is entitled Teardrops on Ozobolo. It is my tribute to the tragedy that struck worshippers in a Catholic church in Ozobolo exactly 5 years yesterday, when assailants invaded that church and left 21 people dead. I couldn't find peace because of the irony of people looking for where to find greater life, but meeting their death in the process. So the poem goes this way. Dawn explodes in a burst of gunfire. Revenge, speaking through clenched teeth, spits bullets into the cathedral. The shriek of bleeding worshippers wakes the sun on the wrong side as faith meets with faith in a brawl of death. Between the pews, the bishop's father laid down his life that his son might live another day, for there's a price to pay. But how long shall my people live? What suicidal thoughts shut our eyes to the boiling threat of a moral time bomb? When society closes its eyes to shame, when evil sits at the table with good, and the cassock loses its moral voice, the heaven speaks in a voice of murder, the voiceless donkey rebuking Balaam to stop the madness of the prophet. Now our eyelids are heavy with tears, for lives cut down by the match flare of greed on bended knees in God's house. So let the tears drop now for believers who found death in the search for tears drop. Let the tears drop on Ozobolo. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So my second poem is actually a love poem, not much like my brother's, but maybe a little bit close. It's entitled A Memory of Love and Loss. And he says, let the winds fling these words against the skies, and let them fall down to earth, scattered, ungatherable, at the foot of morning flowers. For what use are words when they fail to bring you back into my starving arms? What voice have dumb alphabets when they fail to sing you back, my love? For you are the bird that summons my heart without a sound. You are a hit song. You built a house in my head, and now I'm consumed with miming your name in wondrous wonder to the moon. Flower, I blush at the gift of your smile. For with you, moments are fragments of broken jewelry stored away in memory. Today, ruminant and filled with longing, I spread those stored moments like scented lingerie in the summer sun, flailing like precious tenderries of love. Our love. So tonight, Let the winds bear these verses like a burnt offering to the clouds, that when you sleep, my love, they may hum with liquid legs on your roof. Let them fall in syrups on bruised petals in memory of love and loss. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And finally, last but not the least, Mr. James Baldwin. Ogaga Ifowodo.
Thank you very much. T.S. Eliot said, a man's destination is his village. And the famous German poet Rainer Maria Rilke, in his letter to a young poet, described childhood as that precious kingly possession, that treasure house of memories, and advised the young poet to go and raise the submerged sensations of that ample past. What I am doing in Augusta's Poodle is to return to childhood, my earliest childhood, up to the age of 12, to raise the submerged sensations of that past, thereby commemorating flora and fauna, places and faces, rites and rituals to renew allegiance to place. It is a book in 55 sections. I'm going to read the very first one and then one other, which are very short. Now, I was born in one place and opened my eyes to the sun in another. I'm going to start from when I first became conscious of my environment. I awakened to the soft green filtered light of my second residence on earth, some place unknown to the wider world. The orange trees that ripened to that yellow-green of enchanting juice pressed from the pulp by both hands of a child, running down his chin and elbows to make him screech with delight. The air wore neatly its citrus perfume mixed with the blended scent of my great-uncle's orchard. It had all the fruit trees and plants of the world. Avocado, we called it pear, pineapple, pepper fruit, cocoa, coconut, kola nut, ube, or African pear. Its Latin name, I learned decades later, is Dacryodis edulis. It deserved the ornate poetry of Latin. But had I not first known it among the tall trees, had my tongue not first loved the sweet bitterness of its olive green flesh, I might have thought it of the same class as the portable amaryllis. And here I'm trying to describe a rustic village scene and showing that life here is equal to life elsewhere. If you stood still and opened your heart as the rising sun shined its light on this humble patch of the tropics, a pretty pattern will greet you. The precise map of roads to farms, to the edge of the water, the swamps and settlements, surprising you with as much marvel as watching a field of flowers opening and dying at dusk. It's true, you will find no stone columns, limestone facades darkened for added awe by millennial mists, no marbled walls, gables or gargoyles, but Eden had none of that. And you long still for that beginning to be your end. You will see an old woman bent over a stick tell her grandchildren, just joining a silent gaggle of mates, not to play more than they listened at school. Just behind you, a cock in free range may crow the hour next to a hen scratching breakfast for his brood. A council clerk sporting his permanently knotted tie with the telltale stain says, "Good morning, brother," and, not waiting for your reply, mounts his rally. There is a world here as a world elsewhere. And if you stood still and looked with your heart round this landscape of plantains and mud paths, tin roof tenements and unsteepled churches, you might find your face, you might find yourself face to face with the hope of all lives.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Please, a round of applause for everyone who has read. We made good time. And now I'm going to ask a few questions. Ogaga has already started to answer the one I was going to ask, so now you have less time. What I want to know from everyone on this panel, including those online, is what inspired you to write this particular book? I know the process of compiling collections of poetry. Sometimes you've written poems over periods of time, but deciding to put a book together is a conscious decision, and this usually entails a lot of thinking as to what poems make this book and what is this book trying to do in the world. So you have started, so please tell us a little bit about, what informed your decision to publish this book and what you hope it to do in the world, Ogaga, and then we'll go from there back.
Well,
One
I
minute.
suppose,
One
like
minute.
Kola said, I've partially answered the question. My aim here has no grander manifesto than to recapture some memories that have to do with a rather unusual, relatively speaking, childhood. Like I said, I was born in one place and opened my eyes to the sun in another. My father died when I was a year old, so my mother left my father's hometown to my mother's hometown, which is where I grew up. And sharing my time between the village and the city made me see life in a different way. And because as post-colonials, as people who had to live under colonialism and imperialism and the East ideology of denying the colonized place, history, and identity and culture, I felt this as a mission to, by recapturing those experiences of childhood, thereby commemorating and representing, thereby affirming identity and place.
Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you very much. What made me write Dispossessed is this. My parents were victims of the Biafran War. The war trampled on them, dispossessed them of their humanity, and stripped them naked. I have lived with the memory of the stories they told me to this day. And then I grew up in Nigeria and came of age in Nigeria. And Nigeria has not treated me any better than my parents were treated. I still feel dispossessed of the things that I should have as a citizen of a country with as much immense, capacity as Nigeria. So I felt that it wouldn't be just me as a growing, burgeoning poetic talent if my first book of poetry, which Dispossessed is, failed to address this issue of people who seem to be permanently dispossessed, not because they are lacking in ability or they are lacking in quality or any other thing, but the environment of their existence has made it very difficult for all of us to heal from different wounds. There's so many Nigerians that are nursing different injuries, different bruises. There's so much voices of discontent rising in every part of this country. So we are all dispossessed one way or the other. And that is what my book addresses. Thank you.
I don't think it's right for me to say this is the reason I wrote this book, or to say this is the reason we write. I have a long-running engagement with poetry, especially the poetry of love, the poetry of our undying concern for the things of earth. The Love Canticle is part of my journey, part of a constant and unashamed stripping of self, so that I tell my story as simply, as nakedly as I love.
The poems poems in this collection were not written for one specific purpose. However, when I decided to compile this collection, I sat with my editor and publisher, and we decided that these poems have a cohesion to them. And that's because they document and pay homage to the situation that is Nigeria, or has been Nigeria in the last 7 years. Which is why in the 4 sections of this book, you have the staccato verses, which talk about everyday and political issues in Nigeria. We have Love Amidst the Staccato, which talks about love happening in this situation that we find ourselves. We have A Necessary Word and poems titled In Memoriam. All of these speak to the present situation that we have in Nigeria.
Thank you.
Hi. In my own case, I think the reason why I wrote mine is basically all through life, I've been bothered by water, whether it's the river Benue, the river here, Brighton's river, several rivers. So what I did was basically to create some reflections and recollections based on these bodies of water, and I think they ended up coming together in their own way.
Thank you.
Well, I wish you can simply permit me to say that the reason why I wrote the poems is because I have come to see myself as a poet.
Not the poet, not the poems, the book itself.
Okay. There are 108 poems in the collection, done over a long time. So you understand that there will be an impulse.
Right.
However, when I do this collection, I decided to select poems that were not political. I wanted to do a collection of poetry that has nothing to do with politics. So that was my first effort. But towards the end of the collection, I guess I started becoming angry about a number of things. I couldn't escape being angry about those things.
Yeah.
So I decided to add 2 new sections. One on my reflections on the Nigerian situation, and one on the global import of resistance. So if you go through the collection, there are 8 sections. So you have poems on art and creativity. You have poems on faith and divinity. You have poems on mortality. You have poems on the Nigerian situation. You have poems on resistance. So there are diverse poems. They are all lyrical poems. I intended to actually seduce my readers with these poems. So I'm very deliberate in my choice of words.
Right.
They are simple, they are accessible, almost chatty, and I hope that it's going to be a collection that will draw people to poetry, not scare people away from poetry.
Thank you.
But before you leave here, please get a copy.
Thank you. I'm sure the copies are there for them to buy. Prof.
Yeah, thank you very much. My 6th collection was published in 2013.
It's a long time.
So between then and the time I published the 7th one, there has been a lot of wandering on my part, and I constantly...
You became a mogaji.
I constantly engage in dialogue with my land, because I believe, as I put it in one of my poems, that the poet's first duty is to make love to language, to land, and to liberty. This has been my mantra over time since I published my first collection in 1997. So I took time, close to a decade, to come up with 100 cantos because of new experiences, new encounters, of journeying, of meeting new places. And of course, there's always that engagement with the land, in the sense that I consider myself, as so many other poets, as an unacknowledged legislator for my land. Someone who tries to speak for those who are incapable of speaking. And that is why I bring the word of the street, to poetry, in order to popularize the language and even of poetry itself. So, and that is exactly what I constantly do. And of course, by the time I completed it, I realize that there is more than just engaging with land, but there's also about engaging with yourself. Because by the time I completed it, I had survived COVID-19. I was a survivor. And of course, the last part of it just came. I mean, I had to experience that, so nobody needed to tell me about the reality of it. I experienced it. I saw people die where I stayed for 14 days, and the words came without much fanfare. And that is the whole essence of Wanderer Cantos.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I must say that my attitude to writing has been very consistent. The question of the lot of the human condition, which I expressed early in my very second collection, the last poem there is a very short one. I will read it. The title is Isms. And it says, ask me not whether I'm for the left or for the right, because I need neither left nor right to know when my neighbor is hungry, ill, or naked. Before the isms came, I was human. Now, the question is, when we say we are human, what it means is that collectively there's that thing, the firmament that ties all of us together. But in reality, we are divided into two. Not two in terms of north and south, east and west, but in terms of those who are belching because they have eaten to their fill, and those who are yawning because they have nothing to eat. And that is my division of the society. So if you look at the collection, it reflects this dichotomy between those who are eating and continue to eat, whether they are of one religion or other. What ties them together is that they are eating, and those who are not eating, those who are yawning. That is what runs through the poem. And it can be, it applies in almost every situation. Even when you talk of gender, in many cases, where the wife oppresses the husband, the wife would be eating while the husband would be yawning. Where the husband oppresses the wife, the husband will be eating while the wife is yawning. So much of our society, especially the Nigerian society, is so cruelly divided between those who are eating and those who are not eating.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll get back to it. Thank you very much. I'm told that Professor Segun Adekoya is online.
That's why the title is Yawns and Belches.
Right, it makes sense now. And so we'll give Professor Adekoya a chance to talk in a few minutes, but I want to get Romeo and Zukogi a chance to answer this question as well. What inspired your collection, and what can you tell us about your book? Romeo first.
I think for me, when I left Nigeria in 2018 and having traveled through the land borders and toured West African countries up to Mauritania, I was just thinking about journeys in history. And I think I had Harry Garuba's last collection with me. And there was just one line that was speaking to me, which was, I miss the language that once lived in my body. And Dion Brand's I anticipate nothing as intimate as history. I held those two lines with me and thought about it for a year before starting to write those poems about how history is also very personal. So a lot of the poems are just poems that tend to interrogate history and how, we see history now, especially those of us that are very young. A lot of us, at least for me, have no idea about a lot of things that happened in the past. But I think that with poetry, what happens with language is that it quickens language and allows the past to be present in our own lives and to understand it. So this book is just like an attempt to do that. There was also the fact that I was in America, and it was the first time I was truly, in a place where I felt myself, so to speak. Because in Nigeria, I'm Yoruba, but I don't speak Yoruba, and I grew up in Benin, but I don't know how to speak Benin that well. And so there's like that ostracization of being in the middle that I've always felt. And being in America was the first time I could meet a Yoruba person or an Hausa person or whatever ethnic group the person is. And our first communication is English, and our first shared identity is being Nigerian or being black in the world. And I started looking at other poets who have done stuff like that, Cesar, Senghor, and even some of the exiled poets like Adam Zagajewski and Milosh. And I looked at what they did and tend to repeat that in my own experience and see if I can use their language and their own view to interpret what I was going through. And so it's a book in certain parts. Some of the parts are just historical. Yeah. And some of the parts are just what it means to survive as a Nigerian in the world and to just be. I think that's what poetry is at the end of the day. And I attempt to find a way of looking at the world, and that's what I attempt to do with this book. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sadiq, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. So as for me, writing the book, I wasn't trying to make any great gesture towards art. I was just a father who had lost his child. And poetry has always been a way for me to interrogate not just the world, but myself, and to understand some of the intricate relationship that I have with joy, happiness, and even the world. And so when I lost my child, I started reflecting every single day on a piece of paper. And ultimately, after 7 months of doing that every single day, I read a piece to a friend and they were like, oh, this would be a nice way to immortalize this child. So my book right now is just a physical manifestation of my daughter that I lost. And I was a dad who was trying to understand the grief of a child loss.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. If Professor Segun Adekoya is online, we'd like to have him spend two or so minutes telling us about his book as well, and maybe reading a poem or two from it. Is he online? If he's not, okay, he is. We can't see him.
I'm online. I'm online, please.
You're welcome.
I'm online.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Please tell us
thank you.
In 1 minute.
I'm going to read.
Yes, please.
Finally. Okay.
Tell us a little bit about the book and please read. I know. Read it.
Okay.
Yes.
The book is titled Efe Testament. I'm going to read just 3 short poems.
2, please.
The first one is titled Desired Dream, and you find it on page 21.
Go on.
Desired Dream. Let me say that most of the poems in the collection are dreams or fragments of dreams. So this is one of the fragments of dreams in the collection. Desired Dream. I can't shake it off, though it's tough. My lips still tremble and steal from the rumble of hearts stumble. My teeth clatter from the cold of heat in the cold of meat. There is double trouble in the sack of my stomach. Stoked by a dough, ale and steak a drake lake in which fish and fisher fight. And my witch flees my wish from fright. Do you dream at all when you sleep? Do you sleep when you stroll in a stream and desire its clear, small signs, sibilance? Do you sometimes pant in your underpants? Do you sometimes let go and wet your pants? Tell me, how do you cope? Mope when the thick rope with which you lie. Tie the dope of hope to your mighty thigh, thins out, turns loose, and cuts forth. Does thunderstorm lured by lightning crash on your calm sea and fail your faith? What do you do when double-headed axes fly in your face? Their flames find your base and mountainous shocks shake your breast hills. Now the second one is titled Winner, and you find it on page 33 of the book. Winner. No queen wears a pageant crown forever. No winner bears his laurel sans fever. Soft, a pointed breast droop and hag, a leather bag drained of its creamy milk. Sap, his manhood loses its hood and sighs. Sagged sack, a large serpent void of venom, lies prostrate, tight prostate, unflappable. Pumice skin wrinkles like crumbled paper that crackles, protesting its smooth face crushed by greedy callous hands, curls like sharp sand, stresses on curl, grow gray, lackluster, a wire sponge for scoring out pots and pans that feed dirty dishes and fat bellies into which peas and peppers disappear. Then they gush out and rush into sewers. Fertilized, her tummy mimes a mound, erect figure 8 wobbles and grumbles. Joy mounts as jesters and womb balloons, but roars at the lion that wrecks her body. Vertical letter I decollated, ego lopped off. Meanings that pen the piece of peace, pieced. Its squiggles, troubles are unreadable. Rebellious ram straining rapidly at the leash. Willful fool whose hobbled horse warps a wish. Drab drake rusting behind a potting dove. The last one is titled Rain, and you find it on page 45.
Is it still there?
It's a found poem. It's a character created by Toni Morrison in one of her novels. The novel is titled God Help the Child. It is the plight of a girl whose mother turned her into a prostitute in order to make money. Rain. It's rained too long in your young life. You prefer to stay out in the open, into which your low mammon mad mother, whose stone heart turned steel, whose house fell a hell, raised you to raise your legs for predators, threw you like old trash into a dustbin, with a worn sweater to fight winter frost, for failing to fall for filthy fellatio, and instead beat the meat that mauled your mouth, that drilled your tight ass to yield its yodels, that gore your green gulch before the menses start, and chest bombs startled snoozing seamen, but no merry moans came, only cries of hurt, and the will to kill those who lit the fire. All eyes now look cold, old, and too scary. They leer at you with bile in their blue balls. Or so it seems when they stop, stare, and sigh at your plight and fight with the elements that beat your body and blight your beauty, hurriedly broken in the bad balls brothel. Falling blueberries peeled off from burnt bushes are not delicious, lovely, natural fruits that plead to be plucked and beg to be eaten. Sleep, they smell rotten. Beaten, they taste sour, like old poison, and wreathed in peace, mirthful, resentful only of reels and rolls of evil. Your black lady saves your life with her hands that receive the pallet sent to end it, and shares the mystery of your story, the deep hurt of filial love denied, the horror and terror of being black in a world cornered and won by white bands, itching to hitch a ladder to heaven and control and own all earth's resources. In there, the rain of grace falls on lovers, split by a lie, they heal and mate again. The seed sown takes root, grows, blooms, birds and fruits. Earth swallows the gift and opens her womb. Happy souls sing joyous songs of harvest. Men and women cuddle, children pool. Universes roll on as one body, rocked by the pending pool of paradox. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Segun Adekoya. So I'm going to ask just one more question of everyone, and after that, we're going to have one more reading session, each of you reading one poem this time, and then we'll throw the questions open to the audience. So my question is kind of two in one, and you feel free to answer in whatever way you want. What does poetry mean to you? Is the question. Because some people write prose, some people write drama, some people write essays, journalism. Many of you write in other fields as well. But what does poetry mean to you? Why choose poetry as this medium you want? And what authors inspire you to go on this journey? If you can take one of them, that's fine. If you can take the two, that's fine. But you have 1 minute, and I want everybody to take a stab at it. So what does poetry mean to you? That is, why do you choose poetry? Or, you know, and then what authors do you read? What authors inspire you to continue on this journey? Let's start with Professor Oshi. And we go this way and then online.
Yeah.
1 minute.
Poetry means the world to me.
Quick.
In the sense that poetry is about the closest to my own speech in my own mother tongue. And in fact, I would look at poetry as the choice of the elders, the people who really have mastered the language. They are the ones who go into poetry, and it makes, there's so much that can be said in very few words. And it's like kola nut, which you eat. While you eat it, it's bitter. But the
after effect,
the good taste lasts for a very long while. As often as you drink water, you continue. That's why we still enjoy Shakespeare's poetry till today. And we'll continue to enjoy it because fresh meanings keep coming out. So poetry is very rich. It's about the riches of the three genres.
Thank you.
Then my inspiration to go into poetry is mainly, partly as explained it in the context of the title of this book. It is a way of, a process of a cathartic process, a way of emptying one's bottled up emotions, which if not emptied at a particular time, can cause an explosion, sometimes implosion. So the best way is to make a victim of an available page so that it carries the burden away from your body.
Thank you very much. Professor Raji.
Okay, thank you very much. You said 1 minute. For me, poetry, to deduce from T.S. Eliot, is about negative capability. That is to be able to represent others, as I said earlier, to be able to play a role. Poetry is about role playing. Poetry must give us the power, because I think that poetry should be able to change things. Poetry matters. Poetry should be able, poetry is more like the proverbial golden knife. It can punch holes in the conscience of people. You can use poetry to do a lot of things. So poetry is advanced speech, so to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, for me, it's simple. If you have developed love or passion for poetry, it becomes your go-to creative effort. And sometimes the subject matter or the inspiration determines the form that you adopt. Certain issues or certain subjects that come to you, and you just know naturally that you have to shape this as an essay. And sometimes an inspiration comes to you and you know that this has to be a short story. For the subject matters that I've treated in this book, they came to me as poems. And so what I decided to do was to take those matters and then infuse the aesthetics into them, because I understood that the subject matters alone will not make art. It is the capacity to impose craft and aesthetics on the subject matter that makes it art. And that's what I've done in every poem in the collection.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think the second thing you said was the people that inspire us to write,
Yeah,
more or less.
if you can take that, that's fine.
So I think that's better because everybody is being very philosophical about what poetry is or is not. So in my own case, I think I'm inspired largely by my contemporaries, fellow writers. Interestingly, I know more than half of the people on this list, and there are people who keep on inspiring me, and even the work here is largely stuff we've collaborated on. I've worked on this and even Iko's book. We worked together on them. There's Sergio here, Amara. These are people who I call at almost any time and we begin to think. And it's frustrating, you know, being a Nigerian sometimes. And we always try to find ways to let go of the steam. Sometimes prose helps, but I feel like the emotions go more into poetry. There's just something about poetry and emotions. So all these people in their various ways, if I was to give a litany of these people, I mean including UKT, we could go on till next year. But basically, the country and the very fine people, our contemporaries, are those that keep on inspiring, my art, my poetry, and everything.
Thank you very much. I saw your acknowledgement page is quite long.
Sorry?
The acknowledgement page is quite long.
Indeed.
Iko, you're next.
So poetry for me is escape. It's how I run away from the madness in the world. Poetry is also freedom for me. It is how I give voice to those that I think do not have a voice. It is actually me breaking free from all the things that have shackled me, and not just this year, from many years ago. So it is me. Poetry is how I become my own. So even though I write in other genres, poetry for me is how I interrogate myself, using everything going on around me, things happening to people, things happening in the country and the world, and how I discover who I am and help, you know, give a voice to others through that discovery.
Thank you.
To explain how I approach poetry and how poetry approaches me, I think I have to tell a little story from my beginnings. I didn't study literature.
1 minute.
And I went with some of my friends, one of them wrote poetry in the university, to the female hostel at Nsukka, and he brought out his poem and was intimidating all of us. And I got upset and I said, look, you don't do this here. And he got upset and he says to me that I was dead without poetry, and I was inelegant, I was unsophisticated, and just like you guys are laughing, that was how they laughed at me. And I thought to myself, this won't happen again. So the following week, I went to the bookstore and I said to the attendant, I want to become a poet. So poetry for me is that he sees what does not exist and writes it into being. And somewhere I also say, literature is listening to the breathing of God and putting it into words.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Fascinating answers so far. Please go on.
Okay.
James.
Well, thank you very much. Poetry, you know, for me is a very intense and private moment when I find myself free to shed silent tears without being ashamed of my expression. It's a look to encounter, and then looking upwards, I have a new binoculars to engage my environment. That's poetry for me.
Thank you.
Why do I write poetry, or what makes me write poetry? Inspired by, you know, the swirl of emotions around me. My sense of history, sense of justice, and sense of self-worth impels me to express myself in verses. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Baldwin, you have 1 minute.
In my secondary school, Federal Government College, Warri, we had an annual festival of arts and culture. And one of the events was poetry among the four houses. In my fourth form one evening, a lower sixth former turned to me and said, "Why don't you write a poem for our house?" I hadn't ever put two words together by way of creative writing before. And I said, "Why not?" So I wrote a poem which won the first prize for my house, Independence House. So it meant that for me, poetry was my first act of expression, expressing myself creatively. And later on, I found that poetry gave me the ability to be both spontaneous and be circumspect, and to also go for language in figures, which is a language that lingers most, that tends to endure. Without metaphor, language tends to be wooden. And poetry gives me that expansiveness to be both abstract and at the same time as voluble as I can be. And as for who has most influenced me, of course, you know that's a difficult question to ask a writer. You have drawn in so many streams, you have swum in so many rivers, you have stood on so many shoulders that it is hard to just choose one. But if I must point to one whose aesthetics, whose prosodic choices, whose even daring grab of vast swathes of history, still within the discipline of meter and metaphor, it will have to be Derek Walcott.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we're going to go through the last set of readings. This time, just one poem, preferably the shorter ones, because we don't have time and we want to be able to take questions from the audience. We're supposed to be out of here by 5:30. And so I want you to choose a poem that you think is brief enough to go through once. And after that, we'll take questions from the audience and we'll go on. Where do we start this time? Ogaga, do you want to go first? Oh,
this time.
Yeah? Somebody else. Okay, let's start on the internet then. Zukogi, do you want to start for us this time, please? One poem. Sadiq. If Sadiq is not, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I know that a few people on the internet would also love to define what poetry is to them. It would have been nice to have that
Please,
opportunity,
go on. Just 30
either ways,
seconds.
I'll read the poem.
Yes, please.
Memories by the Sea.
Oh.
Imagine a forlorn child conceived the sun that rouses the mouth of the universe, peering into the throbbing throat of night. Imagine the dark seams, thick threads that bind voices to a giant vault of silence. Imagine him rubbing his fingers across your picture, trying to close your lips with words as you wander off into the horizon. Imagine your face, still a sky peering down into his mind. Now imagine the sun as reverie, and there by a sea, he is learning to fetch a bit of that firmament. Imagine this. When his mother stays your shadow, it bedlams in his body. A seashell swallows the wave back into its depth. Imagine looking deeply into his reflection until it convinces you you can exist as a fraction out. Imagine you're a star, trancing in his thoughts about you. Imagine each time you feel like forgetting something about him, even if insignificant. Imagine glaring the blue zenith bordered in a surface marred by tides. Imagine memories split apart by the sea reassembles like a solved puzzle picture. How he wishes he imitate that multitude, the right places that hold you whole. He hears the night holds on to your voice like a basket finally able to hold water. Imagine he presses his feet against wet sand and slips into a footprint. Here is a mystery, close to a shoreline, a portal. Here's the distance, the vast sea between your bodies, wading through the dark throes of separation. Imagine